The PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 had some very different hardware inside of them. Because of that, the games that released on them were often pretty different. To showcase those differences, I made a video where I compared 34 racing games, 17 on the PS1 and 17 on the Nintendo 64. Some of them were direct comparisons, some of them were just showing off what the systems could really do. In the comments of that video, I got some suggestions and recommendations, and because of that, I decided to make a second one, 30 more games, 15 on each system. This time, I'll be utilizing some more of the card games or vehicular combat games that I didn't really want to include previously, so yeah, the rules are simple. First, I'll show off some games that released roughly at the same time with a similar theme, which I will not be scoring directly, but I will be giving my personal opinions on, just to show really what these systems could do. And then, as people hoped, I will directly compare some cross-platform titles and score them. Let's begin. Megaman Battle & Chase came out a year after Mario Kart 64. While Battle & Chase is a more complex game, both in terms of design and graphics, with 3D cards and objects, Mario Kart 64's smoother frame rate really makes it feel smoother to play. Even so, Mega Man's far smoother road utilizes a lot more polygons than the one in Mario Kart 64, and because of that, it can bend into some really interesting shapes, and it makes the game seem a bit more high effort. Frame rate issues aside, I have to prefer Mega Man. The track is a lot more detailed, and the 3D models of the karts really push it above Mario 64 in terms of graphical power. Crash Team Racing came out a year after Diddy Kong Racing. Graphically, both games utilize 3D models for karts and characters, while their wheels are still 2D objects. While Diddy Kong Racing definitely doesn't look bad, Crash Team Racing is just a visual treat. I mean, it's something we would expect from the developers who put thousands of polygons per second into their Crash Bandicoot games. It's just a visual treat, and that's why I prefer Crash Team Racing. Rallycross and Extreme G came out in the same year. Both games try to show off a detailed and natural environment. While Rallycross focuses much more on what is in front of the player character thanks to the dense foliage, Extreme G utilizes the Nintendo 64's muddier graphics to make you feel as if you're going through a giant natural space, and it's far more impressive, plus the camera angle doesn't suck. Because of that, I really prefer Extreme G. TOCA Championship Racing came out a year before F1 Grand Prix. While both games do their best to show off limited track environments, TOCA has a 3D in-car camera and some pretty detailed car models, while F1 WGP has some good-looking F1 cars, though they do look a bit crunchy when far away, and a very good-looking track environment, with the trees being a big highlight. Crunchy cars aside, it is surprising what F1 WGP can show on screen at once, which is why I prefer it. WipEout 3 and F-Zero X came out in the same year. They're both futuristic races, but they take the idea of a futuristic racer pretty differently. WipEout 3 focuses on showing off some extremely nice, detailed environments, along with 12 vehicles on the track, while F-Zero sacrifices basically everything to run at a smooth 60 FPS with 30 vehicles present on the track at any time. Though it runs very smoothly, I feel that graphically, way too much was sacrificed in order to make it run at 60 FPS. I mean, this video is running at 30 and it still kinda looks the same. Because of that, I prefer WipEout. TOCA 2, Touring Car Challenge, and Top Gear Overdrive came out in the same year. TOCA 2 continues the legacy of TOCA 1 with some nicer looking car models, environments, and a large amount of cars on screen, though that can cause frame rate issues. Top Gear Overdrive is a bit of a mixed bag. While some parts of the environment look really nice, like the trees in the distance and some of the tunnels, other parts like the snow sections just look ugly. Considering both of these games are going for a similar-ish realistic style, I just have to say, I prefer TOCA. Porsche Challenge came out a year before World Driver Championship. Porsche Challenge looks decent. The track is nice, the environment ranges from very good to really decent in some places, but World Driver Championship, it just looks a lot better. The cars are pretty detailed, the environments are larger and have more detail. I mean, compare the two, it just looks better, which is why I prefer it. Need for Speed 5 and San Francisco Rush 2049 came out in the same year. Need for Speed 5 has some pretty good looking car models, and the environments look pretty nice as well. SFR, however, looks amazing. The frame rate may suffer a bit in some places, but goddamn does it look good. You really have a sense of scale while playing this game. It's properly utilizing what the Nintendo 64 could do, which is why I prefer it. And now, it is time for us to tackle the direct comparisons. San Francisco Rush Extreme Racing came out in 1998 on the PS1 and in 1997 on the Nintendo 64. Both games here look pretty similar, and there isn't that much to comment on except one is sharper, the other's muddier. However, the road does look better on the PS1 version, which is why it gets a point. Roadsters came out in the year 2000 on the PS1 and in 1999 on the Nintendo 64. While both games look pretty solid due to the natural environments they both use, the Nintendo 64 does a much better job with the foliage, trees and such, and that's why it gets a point. Vigilante 8 came out in 1998 on the PS1 and 1999 on the Nintendo 64. The game looks great on both systems. It's really too close to tell with the standard caveat of sharp versus smooth textures, and it's really down to which one you personally prefer. I'm fine with either. Both get a point. Vigilante 8 Second Offense came out in 1999 on both systems. The story here is identical to the last one, bar some slight graphical differences. The games basically look the same. You can't go wrong with either one of those versions, and both get a point. LEGO Racers came out in 1999 on both systems. The PS1 version is overall a bit brighter and has some sharper textures, but otherwise, they're both the same. Again, both get a point again, and this is going to be the last disappointing one, don't worry. Revolt came out in 1999 on both systems, and it's not really good on either system, it's far better on the Dreamcast. However, as is, the PS1 version has sharper textures, which really does help. Both have about the same draw distance, I measured it. Similarly, the frame rate may be higher on the N64 version in one part of the track, and then it traps itself in another part where it runs really well on the PS1. So yeah, the systems were in fact different. I just have to award a point to the PS1 version here because yeah, the textures are sharper and it actually is something I noticed versus the other games where I didn't notice that until I focused on it, so yeah. But if you actually want to play Revolt, play the Dreamcast version. Hydro Thunder is a game that's released in the year 2000 on both systems. Just like with the last one, the Dreamcast version is a lot better. Either way, the PS1 version has a high texture resolution, however, the Nintendo 64 one has better looking water and also better lighting. That is why I'm awarding the Nintendo 64 version a point. So each system has 5 points. Yeah, so it turns out the direct racing multiplats were kinda close. Surprising, isn't it? Well, you see, the Nintendo 64 was generally good at racing games. Most of them don't utilize that much data, as they only need to load the road. And because of that, because most objects aren't occluded, you don't really need to use the Z buffer that much, and if you know a bit about the Nintendo 64, the high latency memory really hates reading and writing to the Z buffer. So, of course, If you've seen the last video, you know that the PS1 won by a landslide in the games that were compared directly there, but that's just the way it is. The Nintendo 64 had a smaller library, and it was harder but definitely very possible to make stuff look nice on it due to the low resolution, muddier textures and stuff, and the fact it was harder to program on for various reasons. But back in the 90s, just because the PS1 had more games, even if the multiplats were, as you can see here, still decent on both systems, even if they're slightly better on one or the other, except in NASCAR 2000, holy shit, that track on the Nintendo 64 version looked horrible. Basically, they were decent on both systems, but because the PS1 just had far more games, it just made more sense to get one. Which is why it sold over 100 million units. Anyways, that's gonna be it from me. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, do all the standard YouTuber stuff people tell to do. This video isn't sponsored, but you should play one of the Panzer Dragoon games. Either of them. Preferably either the Saturn ones, the Xbox One, or the modern remake. Bye bye!